Today I'm going to be learning more about the geography of Australia. One of my viewers recommended this one. It's called Australia's Weird Geographical Quirks. So I've learned a lot about the geography of Australia already in different videos, and it's always very interesting because of the size of the country and the variance in geography. There's always very interesting things to learn in every video, but this is Weird Geographical Quirks. So not too sure what that even means, but interested to find out as always. Tell me what you think about this.
Here are some geographical quirks of Australia that you might not already know. These are the Australian states and territories. Here's Tasmania, the only island state, ringed by ocean and cut off from the rest of the continent by the Bass Strait. Except it's not quite. If we zoom in, we can see that Tasmania and its northern neighbour state Victoria actually share a land border on this tiny and uninhabited island.
Really?
The maritime border between the two states cuts right across Boundary Islet. This little islet border anomaly arose as the result of surveying errors and misinterpretations when repeatedly carving off sections of the colony of New South Wales into what are today Tasmania and Victoria. Boundary Islet is basically a chunk of rock that sometimes has some seals lounging on it. Speaking of disjointed borders, the Australian capital...
What? That's already kind of blown my mind that Victoria and what I just thought was like Tasmania being obviously quite far away from the land, sometimes not even existing to some people's knowledge, share a land border. And it's such a small, it's almost insignificant, but it actually has huge significance. That's actually quite mental. I wonder how many people in Australia are aware of that. Is that common knowledge that there's a land border between those two states? I guess that's kind of like a good answer to a pub quiz question. Yeah, tell me what you think about that one already.
Territory, or ACT, was carved out of New South Wales so the federal government could have a territory of its own from which to govern. But they felt strongly about the federal government also having access to a seaport, so instead of making the ACT somewhere on the coast, they just annexed another small territory, the southern peninsula of Jervis Bay. Jervis Bay is a separate territory from the ACT, but when it comes to federal elections, the people of Jervis Bay vote in the electorate of Fenner, which is centred in the ACT. And in terms of geographical quirks of electorates, spare a thought for the people of Norfolk Island, who vote in the ACT electorate of Bean, 1,900 kilometres away. But that isn't even the furthest removed local representation in the country. The electorate of Lingiari encompasses the red centre of Australia, the tropical top end of the Northern Territory, minus the urban areas of Darwin and some of Palmerston, and Christmas Island, which is 2,500 kilometres away.
Yeah.
And there are some even more widely distributed pockets of Lingiari. Maybe it needs a video of its own. While we're on...
Yeah, that's also quite mind-blowing. I guess it makes sense in a way. The thing I learned about most recently with regards to Australia's geography was those very interesting little islands. Over 8,000 islands around Australia. I learned about some of them previously. Christmas Island being so far away is interesting. So I guess they've got to vote somewhere, or I guess they've got to be represented somewhere. These ones already absolutely blowing my mind. It shows that not only are like there's things of huge geographical interest, all these little small things, I guess as it says, quirks. I wonder, again, if these are very common knowledge in Australia from Australians.
The topic of the outback. Australia is home to some really large pieces of land that are used for cattle stations. The largest is Anna Creek Station, which is the largest cattle station in the world. It's over 23,000 square kilometres, which is a larger land area than 50 of the world's countries. And it's also true that the country of Brunei used to own a station in Australia that had a larger land area than Brunei itself, although it sold the
Really?
station in 2018. Back to the state borders now.
Yeah, that one again. Obviously, I live in Malaysia, so Brunei is relatively close. Interesting that they had land bigger than their own country. I guess their leaders are insanely rich, so they probably own property and land all over the world. But to have one that's bigger than your country, I guess there's not many places they could own land that's that big in a place like other than Australia. Anna Creek again seems like a very interesting place. The fact that blew my mind was it's bigger than South Korea, just that one piece of land or that one property. Having been to Korea and how much like goes on all over the country, even not just Seoul, that there's one cattle station bigger than that is like quite amazing. Tell me more interesting things about Anna Creek as well.
And while Australian Aboriginal people have of course been living on the land with their own boundaries for tens of thousands of years, when white colonists tried to divide it up, the results were imperfect. Here's the border of Victoria, New South Wales and South Australia. Looks like it should be a pretty neat line, right? If we zoom in, we can see that the borders are actually a bit of a mess. Victoria juts out to the northwest. The river boundary moves from being along the southern bank to being in the middle of the river, and the intersection of the three states is in the middle of the river.
Yeah, that's true.
So why isn't this just a nice line? The 141st meridian was originally surveyed to be the eastern border of South Australia. However, it was incorrectly placed about 3.5 kilometres west of where it actually lies. When the mistake was discovered, New South Wales decided it was fair enough and established the accurate meridian as the border. Victoria kind of went, yeah, no, we like the border where it is, leaving us with this mess today. And Australia has another line that looks straight, but it's actually not.
With that one and the first one being the first one was obviously surveying errors. That one was just an error. Quite mad how the whole like complexion of a country can be like divided based on just a mistake. I wonder who actually made those mistakes that had such like importance to a country.
The borders of the Northern Territory, South Australia and Western Australia. This north-south line cutting across the entire continent looks dead straight. But if we zoom in, we can again see there's a tiny perturbation. This deviation is only 127 metres long, and was of course the result of another surveying error 100 years ago. The border was intended to be approximately on the 129th meridian, so instead of measuring from one end of the continent to the other, 2 points were picked at either end that were pretty close to the meridian, and a north-south line was drawn from each point. Except, of course, the points were not exactly on the meridian, so the north-south lines didn't match up. Instead of fixing it, they just drew an east-west line to join the two north-south lines up.
Fair enough.
Could they have fixed it? For sure. But they had actually already agreed not to worry too much about little slip-ups like this.
I like the mentality, nah, let's just chill, man. Don't worry about it, we can just draw the other line. But how easy is it to change something like that? What's the actual process? Does anybody know how you would do that? Is it like going to some sort of government office and just saying like, we want to change this line to here? I guess there's obviously a lot more to it than that, but I love like it's just mistakes and people are like, nah, let's just chill.
They'd agreed that an academic result was not to be sought after with a high and fanciful degree of accuracy. A century-old way of saying, she'll be right.
She'll be right.
And just a couple for my fellow Victorians who, like me, thought they had a good mental map of Australia in their head, but maybe I don't. Adelaide is north of Canberra, and Perth is north of Sydney. These realizations actually blew my mind. Well, that's it. I hope there was something for everyone in this video.
Really cool video, man. I'll leave the link to his video in the description. Go give his channel a follow, definitely. It's like very interesting stuff. Really learned a lot there. I'm sure there must be people in Australia who don't know these things or have not learned it. It's like, where would you even learn it? It's so like precisely detailed. It's not like the sort of overview you would learn in geography in school and things like that. It's not like, probably not as important, but it is quite important in a way, these things. It's just very interesting quirks. Tell me if you know anything else like this, any other quirks of Australian geography. Thanks.